Hello, everyone. Welcome to MSP Unplugged, episode 25, Manage and Control. I am your host, Paco Lebron. This is your live show where we discuss different ways to run your IT business, whether it's managed services, consulting, break fix, or anything in between. Let me go ahead and introduce our guest. We have Chase Doelling from JumpCloud. Chase, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Paco. Looking really forward to having this conversation.
Appreciate it. And we appreciate you coming out on a Sunday evening as well. As you all know, you can see Jeff is not here. Jeff is working tonight. So we will be doing this essentially a duo to talk about a little bit more on JumpCloud and essentially the show's title, Manage and Control. But before we go into all that, I wanted to go ahead as we normally do in the beginning of the show, is we could share a tip or a story. And Chase, do you have anything for us that we can possibly learn from this week?
Yeah, a couple things. So I guess one really tactical thing, we're actually working with a partner. And for those who have been using kind of AWS infrastructure, we're going through like their Linux 2 version and found out that they've been actually using the release candidate version instead of the final version. So just fun note, use the final version when you can. That's the one that's supported by AWS for like 5 years. And moving forward. The other one that I have, I think, is a little bit more general and probably more to the state of just communication ongoing. I think a lot of us are used to, popping in, having a couple different meetings, but really now that we are moving more into, email is kind of the default, and we're a Gmail shop over at JumpCloud. And so, I've been working with our teams and, people on my team as well, just on like snoozing templates, like those little nitty-gritty features that help you just become a lot more efficient in kind of how you're communicating with folks, right? And if you haven't learned them already, learn the hotkeys, those types of things.
Gotcha. No, and that's great. I mean, it's very important nowadays to make sure you're using the latest software. I mean, I think anything with it's going as close to, have you rebooted your system and making sure that everything is good to go from there. And kind of what you were talking about too, as far as really the remote work and really understanding kind of being better and being more efficient. I think for me, kind of going into, I guess, my tip as well, is really focusing on being efficient and making sure you get the most out of your day, where maybe leveraging some add-ons or tools. So we're an Office 365 shop here, and we use a company called Boomerang, which I've mentioned on a couple other podcasts before. And really the biggest piece on that is just being able to, for those night owls and just, let's say you don't want to engage a customer at 8:30 at night because you don't want them to think it's a thing that's going to keep happening. And you don't want to make sure that you're not setting that precedence that, hey, I can reach out to Paco because he's around by 8:30 at night. So having that type of software available and being able to go ahead and push them out is really what's going to be best. Being efficient. For those on the G Suite side, Boomerang does also work, but I actually was using a software called Mixmax, and that was actually working really well. And that was actually my daily driver, what I was using before I switched over to Microsoft 365, which I went back to Boomerang to kind of handle all that stuff for me. But yeah, that's essentially a tip. Be efficient, be better, and pay attention to what you're downloading and installing and testing with. You want to make sure you're as efficient as possible. But with that, we're going to go ahead and dive into our main topic. And essentially, it's going to be admin life redefined. Manage and control all your organization's identities, assets, resources, using essentially the world's #1 cloud directory service. And that's what JumpCloud says on their website. But before we go into kind of JumpCloud, we did have JumpCloud on before when we were the Computer Repair Podcast back in episode, I believe, 315. I believe that was the episode, or 395. One of the two. If you search in our YouTube channel, youtube.com/MSP Unplugged, you will see the playlist of all the previous Computer Repair Podcast shows, and you'll see JumpCloud in there. But it's been quite some time since we had them on the show. So, but before we go into all that, Chase, why don't we go ahead and just kind of give us an intro, your origin story of kind of how you started and got into the industry, and then how you kind of made your way into JumpCloud.
Yeah, for sure. And so I've been around kind of B2B SaaS startups for the last decade plus. And so for me, grew up still hanging around in Colorado. I was fortunate to hang out with a company called Rally Software, and they did a lot of agile methodologies, right? And kind of, I mean, for those who are familiar with Jira, very similar on that note. And that was a great ride. So went up with them, went public. And then we were acquired by Computer Associates, so CA. And so that was fun. I was fortunate enough to manage their global developer marketing group. Hung out there for a little bit, and then a few years within Cloud Elements. And so they're embedded integrations. And through that, worked through a lot of alliances, technical partnerships, those types of things. And then when I actually joined JumpCloud, I was looking after their strategic alliances, technical alliances. So our relationship with Workato and Duo, and some of the other providers that just enable JumpCloud to do all those things in a lot of different environments. And then recently, I think in April, actually stepped in to kind of manage the MSP group. And so now we kind of have all partnerships under one head. But it's been a great learning experience, kind of diving into the world that is MSP and kind of uncovering like all the different nuances that partners handle on a day-to-day basis, right? And a lot of, I think, organizations and people, even if they're hiring MSPs, don't have a good sense of all the things that are coming through. So it's been a fun ride.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I will kind of probably just go right into it. And, for those that don't know and never heard of JumpCloud, or may have heard of JumpCloud, but don't really understand what it does, what would you say JumpCloud does in essentially a nutshell? And we can kind of dive into kind of the different things that it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for, not to, gloat too much, right, on the number one cloud directory. But I think if you're not used to that type of notion, usually the good starting point is, hey, it's Active Directory in the cloud. I think even within that, that's typically a loaded statement too for people who have been working on Active Directory for years and years and years. But essentially what it is there's two different types of components. One is that notion of having a directory setting within the cloud. And that's really helpful kind of within today's world, right, where everyone's kind of working remotely. But it's that notion of managing that identity. A good colleague of mine, Scott Reed here, he uses this analogy, and I'll steal from him. But essentially, you can think of us as this intersection between identity and a directory, and then also systems, right? And kind of how all of those different kind of interplay. And really, the goal for us is to get work done. And we do that from kind of an end user perspective of having this notion of have access to everything you need, nothing you don't, everything securely managed from the admin side, whether it's policies, systems, different protocols that we can leverage throughout that. But really giving that user just kind of one password to operate with. And then everyone knowing that, with layers of MFA and resets and all those different types of things, that you're operating in a secure environment. And it really doesn't matter where you are anymore, right? Because that whole notion of sitting with an Active Directory and kind of within this domain, right? And so really for us, it's allowing a lot of organizations to be domainless in a sense, and actually being more secure than they were before, because it's not this kind of mix of hodgepodge and kind of layering on, well, I think it can work here, and let's hope they dial into the VPN once a week. And we're able to remove a lot of those notions. And so within a nutshell, and obviously we can dive in a little bit deeper there, but that's kind of how JumpCloud operates. And I think that's one piece in terms of the technology, right? And kind of, I think there's a lot of other organizations, you can take your pick as far as disrupting companies, moving into the cloud and taking those things. What I'd say the other interesting asset for us in terms of being a directory is kind of the specific markets that we play in, right? We're not here to just go after the enterprise and kind of have that, right? Microsoft obviously owns that, kind of fully, but really, and especially within the MSP side, we're really here to support small and medium kind of enterprises of the world. A lot of organizations, right, when you think about their first identity, especially newer organizations that may be born in the last 7-8 years, whatever that might be, their first identity is like a G Suite domain or an Office 365, right? And then as they continue to grow up, and they're like, well, we need more access control. We need to know where these people are going. And there's not a whole lot of options if you're not used to having kind of a server set up, right? And so you're like, well, then it becomes a harder conversation of like, well, I can either have compliance and something in a closet or not. And so for us, we really look to fill that gap and actually help scale a lot of organizations throughout that type of business model.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I kind of say the same thing as I kind of introduce this to my clients, and I am a JumpCloud, for disclaimer, I am a JumpCloud user. I've been using JumpCloud for the last 2 years, and it's pretty much on all my system. I've actually been running it internally here for the past, as I mentioned, 2 years, engaging with a lot of the features that they have that I'll mention in a bit. But really just mentioning identity management. And that's kind of how I introduce it to my clients, is exactly like you mentioned. And especially now with everyone working remote and going from there. But the biggest piece I'd like to jump on, and for a choice of words, but and you can kind of chime in here and Chase for this, is a lot of people say, well, that's great. I can do identity management with Azure Active Directory. Why wouldn't I just use that versus using, why don't we use that versus JumpCloud? Outside of all the benefits and the value that JumpCloud has, we were greeted with this same issue. Why don't we use Azure Active Directory? Because it's in our Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Why have an extra thing? Well, I'm going to tell you why you should have this product. And this, I'm not being paid for it. This is just what I'm mentioning from my experience. When we were looking at identity management and really understanding, do we continue with JumpCloud or do we move to Azure Active Directory? Because we were a G Suite shop at one point and moved to Microsoft 365 probably almost a year ago, or maybe even 6 months ago. And the biggest piece of it is not only is it less work to implement a JumpCloud instance to tie your systems to a user, but also the ability to have a quote unquote multiple other systems that you can manage with JumpCloud. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Is with Azure Active Directory, as everyone knows, with any other Active Directory product, when you apply it to the system, it creates a new profile, which means that you have to then transfer all the data over from one profile to the other, which sucks. And I've mentioned multiple times how much this sucks, especially if you have multiple users. Now, for those that get bill hourly, have at it, have fun, good. The cool thing about JumpCloud is it has the ability to take over the local account, and it'll be so seamless that the user won't even know that, one, that JumpCloud was installed, and two, that the user was actually the username profile was tied, unless they used a different password from what's on their system compared to what they set up as their profile. If they kept both the same, essentially they will notice no difference, and it will essentially give you all the control on that local account with all the great policies that they have that would be similar to GPO. So that's one reason why I decided to go with JumpCloud. The other issue, or the other thing that we have, is we have plenty of G Suite clients, and you cannot get Azure Active Directory obviously with G Suite clients, and I don't want to manage two different type of dashboards for identity management. JumpCloud takes care of both. So not only does it have the ability of being the identity management software solution for me, it also has the ability to sync from these two sources, among others as well. So I'll give it to Chase to talk about it, but this is kind of why I use this as my identity management solution. And for those kind of just inquisitive of why would I even do that, those are the two main reasons why we decided to have a centralized way of managing our clients, and to, I don't want to do the extra work. I mean, it's just why redo the redundancy when you can have something that would just make it as seamless as possible, because you look better with the client because you didn't really alter anything that they've been doing other than how they log in. And two, it's easy. It's a no-brainer, as Jeff would say. So anyway, I'll go off my rant and kind of shift it over to Chase on talking more about that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think I'll poke at it just a little bit more, but I think one of the things you hit on is just kind of that agnostic view that we have. And so I think in between, G Suite, Office 365, even Active Directory, right? Part of becoming a directory is you also need to integrate with everything else, including other directories, right? Other sources of truth. And so we allow kind of that seamless merge lane, if you will, right? A kind of one traffic, one pane of glass for managing clients. The other piece of that too is just kind of mixed environments. we manage Mac, Windows, Linux, like Linux VMs, however you want to treat that notion. And I think that really allows a lot of our partners to walk into a situation and know that they can kind of handle everything. Especially now that you walking into a situation, I think there's a lot of partners that are used to, well, I'll just, drop in my Microsoft shop, right? Like I have the templated blueprint plan and we'll go from there. But I think more organizations want choice, whether it's device choice, right? And kind of, hey, the marketing team wants Macs. You're like, oh, all right, fine, right? And so it's like those types of things where I think having that optionality allows you to say yes, right? Instead of saying no. And kind of, again, like just, hey, we can do that. We can work within however you want to organize your business. Obviously, we will coach you in best practices and economics of scale and making sure that you're making the right purchasing decisions. But at the same time, if you're like, no, this is the infrastructure, we've decided on it, and you're like, all right, we can support that. So I think that's been a really powerful statement for a lot of our customers that are managing multiple environments like that.
I mean, you hit it right on the head. And we just acquired a client in the same notion, where there were multiple PCs that were home use or personal use devices. Some that were just so old we had to replace them with our preferred Windows 10 devices. There were some that replaced them with desktops. Others were using a tablet as their own system. And the rule basically was, if our monitoring software could not be installed on it, and if it was not of par, where essentially it was out of it wasn't being supported anymore for updates and things like that, then it had to go and we could replace it. So the goal would have been great. Yes, we should all get business assets and this is really how it should be. But exactly like you said, it just, it's this hybrid. This is what we're doing for some. Here's what we're going on. We're perfectly okay with the way we've been doing it for so long. This is what it is. And, JumpCloud has made it that easy, especially when it comes to Windows machines, Mac machines, all those devices, and us having to manage them just on a policy capability. Mm-hmm. And, just being able to have a quote unquote GPO for not only just the Windows PCs, or GPO, like I should say, with the policy function in JumpCloud, but also having policies available for Macs as well. And I'm talking about anywhere from enabling BitLocker encryption for Windows PC, disabling Cortana, enabling File Vault, or enabling File Vault 2 for Mac OS, or what is it called now? Mac OS systems, mm-hmm. Gatekeeper control, having a lot of the granularity for a lot of policies, which have grown since I've joined JumpCloud. And it seems like they're constantly adding more policies on different types of systems as well, including, as you mentioned, Linux, has made it very helpful for us, especially when it just something as small as lock the screen after 15 minutes for compliances. That's been a great way of just turning it on and boom, there's no fuss, no muss, and it just works. And that's what I really love about it. But going into kind of managing that and really understanding what's the best way to do it. I know when JumpCloud was last on, JumpCloud was working on a multi-user tenant portal, mm-hmm. which has now been deployed in JumpCloud. Can you go a little bit more into kind of how that's kind of evolved and kind of how that's helping out?
Yeah, absolutely. And so every time you create a JumpCloud instance, it's its own organization, its own tenant, it's blocked, it's yours. And one of the things we came out with is that multi-tenant view. And what that allows MSP partners to do is essentially hop between different organizations all within this single kind of pane of glass, right? I know that's kind of an overused term, so I'll describe what that means. But essentially, each organization you're able to hop into. And so you authenticate in once as a global admin, and then you can hop between different organizations without having to re-auth in, right? So if you think about it in your day-to-day organization, you can check in on one organization that's a dry cleaners, liquor store, whatever that might be, and then quickly switch over, right? And then again, right? And if it's password resets, onboard, offboarding, all those different types of things, installing the agent on different machines, all those things are kind of operated from just one browser, right? Wherever you are, right? And wherever your clients are. But having just kind of that seamless notion of combining all that into kind of one view has been amazingly helpful for a lot of our partners, right? To just be able to have that type of control. So,
yeah, I know our good friend, the fellow co-host Jeff Hallish, likes to say there is no pane in the glass. There's only a pane in the, so, but essentially, yes. I mean, I agree with, this was a very big requested feature that for a lot of MSPs and IT business owners, but specifically, just kind of bringing it back. And I know that this isn't really the function of JumpCloud per se for identity management, but you can even say you could apply this to residential services as well for those clients, because for those that are looking to get a little bit more security, making sure that their kids are not messing with systems and locking things down as well. I mean, it's really the uses of this is and endless possibilities that how you can tinker with this. And I know that a lot of those computer repair shops, hybrid shops, those that are handling residential services as well, which will go into why it makes sense with kind of how you're offering JumpCloud to IT business owners, MSPs, et cetera. But before we go into all that, I think the really cool part about all of it, just having that multi-tenant, is being able to see your clients and having that one screen to show who's what, where's why. And I think it's really cool that you can actually brand them as well. You can go ahead and brand the actual portal. You can brand your actual specific clients. Do you want to kind of go into more about how those portals are used for maybe a user per se that would log into that portal, or an admin of that portal, or kind of how that branding helps an IT business if they were to look at something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so within the there's two views of JumpCloud, right? Kind of obviously the admin portal, which you can bind systems, create users. We also have this notion between groups. And so we have groups of users and groups of systems. And that's really kind of how you're able to take one identity and say, well, now they're part of the marketing department. Now they're part of the Boulder office. Now they're, also part of the executive team, which has access to everything, right? Or depending on those different layers. And so by just having people within those groups, then you can kind of have that extension. And so all that within the admin portal. And then we also have the user portal, and the users mainly for just ease of access, right? And so it's their first notion of that. They can get prompted for MFA, hop into all the different single sign-on applications that they might have. They're able to, reset their password there. We also have a Mac app and soon to be a Windows app where people can just change their passwords there. And then one of the nice things that we actually just released is essentially our end user agent install. And so this is really helpful in the work remote environment where, hey, we have a machine coming on, it's someone else's machine, but we need to bind that. Like, great, just log into your JumpCloud user console, and then there's instructions there where you can download the agent, have a connect key, and then all of a sudden from the admin screen, comes on as green light, you can then bind that user. So it's a great way for people to kind of have that notion of kind of security all the way through. But then also just that seamless interaction between, if you ever have to hop between an admin and a user, just to troubleshoot, whatever that might be, you can hop within that. So.
Yeah, and I think that's so great the way that the user system is set up as well, because it's very clean on, you create one user and you can bound as many systems as you want to that particular user. So especially if it's a system where it's being used by multiple people, in this case, you can control and see what's going on with those multiple instances that are being installed. But specifically, like for me, I have my home system here, I have my system at the office, and I have my remote system that I carry around with me as well. All tied to one login, one MFA setup, and tying all the applications that I need access it with for SSO, which I guess we'll kind of probably maybe steer toward that direction, is the application setup and kind of how that works with JumpCloud. Right now, I know JumpCloud integrates with many apps to do single sign-on. And for those that don't know what single sign-on is essentially you're going into the system, you have one set of credentials, and it gives you access to all the other systems that you have available. So, for example, if your VoIP system is 8x8, or if you're using Cylance for your antivirus, or for your endpoint security, things like that. So there are quite a bit of those in the system, but I'll kind of lob it over to you for as far as kind of how do applications integrating with JumpCloud work in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll talk a little bit about kind of the SSO side, but then also how it's a little bit different with our relationship between Office 365 and G Suite, because obviously those are a little bit more embedded. But within the SSO side, so I think we were trying to pull it up. I think just shy of 700 applications. 8x8, Salesforce, Marketo, G Suite again, right? If you kind of want to hop into different notions like that, Jira, like you can just kind of keep naming off any sort of major application that you have. And I think what it really comes down to is that end user seamless access, right? And so now you have one password, right, for your machine. You can also layer on MFA for your machine, right? So if you want to do a TOTP token there, so as soon as they open up the lid and then they can connect to Radius, oh, by the way, that's the same password, right? And then we can get into that user screen and you're authenticated into everything you need, right? So from the end user's perspective, my life just got a whole lot easier because now I can hop in everything. I don't need to manage or kind of remember all of the different types of passwords, right? Or have a secondary password manager. We still recommend it if you do, because you always need it. There's always nuances, but those types of things where you can really have it. And we also, offer the ability to create your own. Within JumpCloud too. I guess I'll step back a little bit. Within that core identity, we essentially manage that and gain access to it, but I'll do that through several different secure protocols. So I mentioned Radius. We also do LDAP, but for SSO, we do SAML 2.0. And so if there's another application that's not yet in our catalog, whether it's custom or legacy, whatever that might be, you can actually create your own connector. And then even then, if it doesn't support SAML, we also have the bookmark capability, which is helpful for even we have it in, our own internal intranet in terms of seeing like what features are released, internal branding guidelines, whatever that might be for that organization that's specific to them, even if it's the weather, those types of things that you're able to kind of have that, that one-to-many access point for end users, which has really helped them scale.
Nice. Very cool. Now, I know you mentioned about Radius, which is something that I haven't fully wrapped my head around on how I'm going to implement that. But can you talk a little bit more about what Radius is and how that makes sense for anyone that has a lot of Wi-Fi network deployments that are out there for, it may not probably make sense now with the remote from work or work from home situation, but for those that are going into the office to be secure, let's talk a little bit more about Radius and how JumpCloud's helping with that.
Yeah, I mean, and Radius it's a funny one because it's such an older protocol, right? So it stands for remote authentication dial-in. So the dial-in user service, right? But essentially how that operates, and for those who've ever built a Radius server, you'll be happy to know that within JumpCloud, it's three clicks, right? So you create a server. It's already, we have thousands of clusters, going around the globe, and out pops your shared secret SSID, and you're going there. And so with that, it's really helpful just so that way, you never have the option of, okay, here's the Wi-Fi password on the whiteboard, right? You don't have as many attack vectors, but it's still so common and it's still so overly seen, right? And so, it's especially nice in terms of onboarding, when you're having someone come in and say, all right, here's your one password for everything. Right? You don't have to be like, okay, MSP Unplugged and the S is a $sign, and everything, like, whatever that might be for the organization, you can step away from that. And it's really helpful because there's a ton of what I'd say other providers, right? So Aruba, Cisco Meraki, Juniper, Mist, they all support that protocol. And so you're able to have that authentication mechanism kind of regardless of your equipment as well. So it's helpful. And I will say kind of within the remote era too, I was at a conference last year, and we had a gal come up to our booth, and she was so excited, and it was hilarious because she used JumpCloud at her house, right? And so because she wanted MFA on all of her machines, those types of things, but they also set up Radius on their home home network, which is great just in terms of security precaution. But she also let me know it's a double-edged sword because that way she could always turn off Radius authentication for her husband, right? Just in case. Like, yeah, have that shut down. So there are use cases for it within residential for sure, but it's great in terms of thinking about, mass migration in office setups, right? In terms of if you're walking into a brand new setup and trying to figure out how many access points, where they should go, it's just one less thing that you have to worry about, and it's all handled in the cloud. So you don't, one less thing in the closet for you.
Yeah, and we use Snap AV's Arachnus network gear, and that they also have the ability of using Radius as well. So something to, like I mentioned to you, just haven't figured out how we're going to do that because with everyone working remote, but that's kind of where we're kind of at right now. But I guess why don't we kind of flip it to the remote work a little bit, and how you've kind of seen the benefits, or at least maybe some of the other partners that are using JumpCloud. How are they seeing the kind of the adjustment, and how are they praising essentially, or what are they using in JumpCloud to help make their jobs easier for some of the remote work stuff? Is it more policies? Is it being able to separate out into the groups? Are they really loving the way that they can do the directories, or is it something else completely that is what they're really loving JumpCloud for managing remote workers?
Yeah, I think it's all that, and I'll kind of wrap it up into some bigger themes as well. I think anytime you're talking about remote work, it's the workers at the end of that, right? And kind of the people that are making the organization go. And I think every organization is, some fortunate where they're continuing to grow, and others, where they're put in the unfortunate conversation to kind of like have to offboard employees, right? And so I think that's been the biggest piece for us, is really kind of our value prop around kind of just the onboarding and offboarding of all those employees remotely, right? Because it's not something that you have to come into the office. It's not something that you have to like hop into the VPN to get wired in. And so I think from the onboarding perspective, that's been really helpful, because then it's essentially, hey, we'll ship you your machine. Here's your JumpCloud login, download the agent, here's your password, go, right? And like, that's it. And I think a lot of those pieces too, where, we have password resets and a lot of end user stuff that it helps just kind of day-to-day admin, tasks kind of fall away, right? It's those several less support tickets that you have to deal with. And then conversely, on the offboarding side, where, all of us kind of have our own due diligence, where as not fun as it is, there's still security protocol, right? I've personally been in the situation where I left an organization and I was like, oh, hey, I wonder if I still had, and sure enough, I still had AWS access, right? And you're like, oh, well, go ahead and change that up, right? But not everyone is has that opportunity, right? And so I think one of the nice things around JumpCloud is in the offboarding, it's say, look, we're just actually going to suspend this user, right? And so once you do that, you rip them out of all those different groups, all the systems, everything else that's tied with that. The analogy that I like to use is there's kind of like this access, right? And it's time and access, right? And the faster you can remove access in a little bit of time, like that's your security gap. And so fortunately with JumpCloud, you're able to do that instantaneously. Our agent runs on a 60-second heartbeat, and that's how it pulls down local users and policies and everything else like that. But that's also how it removes users and everything else. So as soon as you're done wrapping up the conversation or whatever that might be, then you know that your organization is still secure. And so I think that's one of the bigger aspects around kind of this remote work era is, that just the flow of talent and kind of how that hits, because typically those are the highest points when you're working within a directory, right? It's creating that identity, but then also removing that identity and kind of all the different bindings and things that happen within that. So I think that's really helped a lot of our partners kind of move along. And I think also, we've gotten a lot of calls that are just like, all right, like we're taking out pieces of the server closet one by one. And for a long time, I think just having that identity somewhere physical, right, where you could see it, smell it, you could turn off the button if you really wanted to, like all those types of things, it adds an extra layer of security, at least mentally. But now I think everyone's in that notion of, well, if I'm working here and the closet's down that way, like how really secure are we, right? And so I think a lot of people are trusting, cloud infrastructure and kind of all the redundancies that are put in place in order to actually make that more secure than it is kind of within a physical spot. And so I think there's also just that mental shift that we're starting to see with a lot of partners that have kind of that forcing function to make it happen.
Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned on how quick the actions are done from JumpCloud, because I made this fatal error of mine where I was actually trying to untie my laptop for whatever reason, and I untied the wrong system. So it ended up locking me out of my own system, and I had to get onto another system to join me back onto the login so that I could go and untie the proper system that was in my fleet, which was fun. But and what is also cool about JumpCloud is if you are offboarding, let's say, a personal device, it does have the ability of removing itself and leaving that system intact and leaving it and move forward for those as well. So, and that's really what I love as well about the system, because you can have both. You can get, if it is a company asset and you need to lock them down, and hey, you need to ship it to us, and there's nothing much you can do about it from that point on a user basis other than them just reformatting the machine. But the other piece of it is you can leave the system intact as it was prior to you installing JumpCloud as well, as far as on a login basis. So I thought that was really cool for that. But kind of going into, as we were mentioning, more on remote on an administrator side, I know that JumpCloud has the ability of being able to run commands through the command function. Can you go a little bit more on kind of the systems and how does that really work, and how it should be used essentially for managing systems in remotely or if in the office?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned before, so essentially we have an agent that will live on the machine, whether it's physical or virtual, and it's a root level agent. And so that's kind of how it gives a lot of our admins the ability to run, commands, run policies, however you want to kind of lock down the machine or not, depending on the levels of privileges that you have. And I think one of the things that's really nice about that too is, so all of JumpCloud is running on REST APIs. So we're a REST API first company. Even the UI that you're seeing, kind of either an admin or user, those are just abstractions of that. Another abstraction that we created was our Powershell module. And so this is really helpful, especially for kind of admins who are like, I love me some Active Directory, right? But if you're in that notion, then you're also familiar with PowerShell. And so it's another way that you can operate that. And so for some of our power users, if you will, they create a lot of custom commands, those types of things. But it's a nice way, or if you're just like, I wonder if I did apply that background policy, right? And like just a quick way to either check, manually do it, and that that's kind of it, right? And so within that 60-second heartbeat, that policy is going to be applied, that local user will be created or removed. And like you said, we have a do no harm approach, right? So if we come in, we land nicely, and if we leave, we exit gracefully. And so really, it's kind of within that control. So, but it adds a lot more power to your tool set, right? If you're already thinking about, well, I'm going to manage these folks within our multi-tenant portal, and I can hop in through there. Something doesn't quite look right. Either I'll pop up in terminal or whatever that might be. And really focusing on a lot of just those efficiencies, right? I know we talked a little bit earlier about just kind of efficiencies with email and Gmail, and all those little actions add up. And so the more that we can remove that, if it's less clicks or just kind of playing in a language that you're already familiar with, that's really the name of the game for us, is just kind of increasing that overall efficiency, because you likely had other projects happening before you found out that you needed to offboard that user or bring someone new on, right? I think that's a piece of that, is we always plan to capacity. And then when something new happens, it's like, well, how do I do this? And so the fact that we're able to catch up those efficiencies, whether it's running those commands or policies against that machine, I think has been really powerful for our partners.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I had not known about the command function until there was an announcement with JumpCloud probably about a month ago, a month and a half ago, about the MDM features that came out with it, where that was really helpful for me. and especially with a lot of fleets that I have with Apple devices. But before we go into there, I'm going to actually take a quick break, and we'll circle back, talk about MDM and maybe some other wrap up for any other stuff before we kind of end the show on there. But specifically, we are going to be talking about TECHCON Unplugged. And I know that we had a couple comments in there. Are we still going to have the show? Is it going to be virtual? Kind of what's going to happen. As I mentioned on Friday's show, and yes, we had a Friday show. So if you didn't see it, catch it. It's already on the YouTube channel and on your favorite podcatcher. But we are currently assessing what we're going to do. And we're going to be making the call next week to determine if we're going to continue to have the event in September with some type of safety precautions, or kind of what is, what we need to take care of to have that event. There's a lot of moving pieces here. There's what's happening right now in the world with with the specific state. We got to figure out what's going on with Michigan and in Grand Rapids. We have to see what ordinances have happened and been placed on the hotel, and where we're going to be doing for the Saturday night social. So we've been told that a lot of these updates should have happened as of Friday. So we have a conversation with all these pieces starting next week. But we also specifically sent out a survey back, I believe, in either April or May, gauging the audience on how you want to engage with us and still come to the show, and what's your opinion about coming to the show. We have I think it was close to about half that have replied to, a third to close to about 40%, actually, now that I think about it, that have replied to the survey. We really expressed those that either signed up for the newsletter or attended the show. You should have got this email. If you did not receive the survey link, feel free to email Jeff at mspunplugged.com or at the info@techconunplugged.com email address to get that link, because we want to hear from you. As we had mentioned from the last show, and we asked everyone if we wanted to have this show again. The entire room raised their hand and said, yes, they want to have the show, and we still want to do good by you. So if there's a resounding majority that say, we don't know if we really want to kind of take that risk and head out, then we'll make that decision to figure out what we're going to do moving forward. Now, to answer the question, will we have the event virtually if we do not have the event? The answer is no. We will go ahead, and if we do have the event, it will still continue in September. If the event does not happen, we will be regrouping and coming back in 2021. So again, my big ask is if you could fill out that survey. If you haven't already, we really want to make sure we get your input, because we want to make the decision not only on what's going on, but what our audience is inputting to us as well. But we have been planning as things have been normal. As you may have noticed, we've updated the site with a couple things. We have a part of our partial schedule. There's some TBDs on there because we did have some vendors that had pulled out. But again, we are working with some others that are interested in coming on to the show. Through all that, to the long-winded phase, TECHCON Unplugged, September 25th to the 27th is when we will be having that schedule. But we do want to make sure we have everyone's input, and we will be making that call next week if we will continue to have the show. So there will be no show. Oops, I just hit the mic. There will be no show next Sunday. However, we will make the announcement either via email or through the Facebook group. If you are a part of the secret Facebook group, if you're contributing to the Patreon for the show, more of that information will be in the show notes. But again, we will get word to everyone next week, and then the show the following week on, I believe it's the 12th, we will go ahead and talk about it on the air. So appreciate everyone that has reached out. I know there's a lot of hardcore yeses. There is definitely a lot of no's, and there's a lot of unsures. And again, we want to make sure we do right by everyone. So TECHCON Unplugged, we will go ahead and have everyone up to date next week. All right. So after all that long-winded pitch, we will go ahead and go back to the subject at hand, JumpCloud. And more importantly, a feature that I was extremely happy to see, because we have quite a bit of Macs in our management that we have to deal with. We have continued to flounder to figure out a solution to really figure out how we can manage our Macs in the most efficient and safe and most secure way. And happened to receive a newsletter, and the day I went ahead and emailed JumpCloud, and they told me MDM feature was fully released. But Chase, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit more about MDM and what the features can do now, and where feedback can be submitted for other items, that for things people that might be using other MDM solutions that are on an agent basis or PC or workstation, whereas here would be on a user basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, very exciting for us. I think, you know, MDM is just one of those areas that we wanted to get into for a while, and we're finally dipping our toes into it and coming in full force. And I think, you know, really for us is kind of rounds out our philosophy, kind of, I guess, point of view. And so when you think about a directory and users, we really focus on the systems. We feel that's where the work's being done. That's where people log in every day. Yes, we can remove kind of all that cloud identity, those types of things, but the more onus that we have around the systems, that's really kind of where you feel the most secure. And for us, you know, the obvious answer through Apple is MDM, right? And so now we're you know, DEP enrolled, and it's really, you know, we had a lot of strong policies, kind of, if you want to think about that layering across Windows, Mac, and Linux. And so I think really it's kind of an additional powerhouse to that of, you know, like wiping remotely, right? And kind of that cleanse and clean era in terms of having that Mac management. And so it's definitely an era that we're coming into. And I think one of the exciting pieces of that is, you know, we, as a directory, we really focus on the users instead of kind of devices or endpoints. And so while that creates an interesting conversation for a lot of our partners, because I think everyone's kind of used to talking in, you know, endpoint vernacular, we take it from a user perspective. And with that, you know, our systems management does as well. We really focus on the user. And so we do have like a ratio of kind of users to systems, but really what that comes down to is, you know, you can apply MDM across wherever your fleet is, right? And I think the nice thing is too, is it's free. And so I think that's the other piece that you don't see from a lot of MDM vendors, because we really focus on the directory kind of access to everything else. And so within JumpCloud, to, I guess, for those who aren't familiar, so our whole business model is 10 for users, free forever. And that's including for our partners. And so, which is especially valuable for, you know, MSP community. If you have smaller clients, you can essentially have everything that we've been talking about, right? MDM, LDAP, SSO, other systems policy management, all those types of things, free. And so we only charge on the 11th user, and we'll grow with you. But we actually have quite a few partners that, you know, I think have 8 or 9 different children accounts that are, you know, they're able to support small businesses. And that's just part of the vision that we've had in supporting small, medium enterprises, regardless of size, since we really, you know, the most crucial time that you have in order to start secure is when you're a smaller organization and you're growing up. And so we're really excited to kind of have the, you know, kind of the best in suite approach, right? And say, if you come to JumpCloud, right, you have all these other things, including MDM. So now you can kind of layer on those additional aspects, layers of control. And then two, you know, one of the things that we are definitely striving towards is kind of like this zero touch approach. And I think that's one of the going to be the unique nuances of kind of how we think about this intersection of identity, directory, and systems, right? And so as soon as you get that system, hey, type in your credentials and you're off to the races, right? And I think that's the end goal for everyone kind of unboxing that machine. And I know that's something that the product team is striving for. We even have a knowledge base article up on it and kind of describing that direction for us. And so I think that's really where you're going to see a lot of our focus go over time. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I know that you guys just recently had a webinar with another fellow IT business owner of kind of how, you know, I believe his main offerings is Mac IT support from looking at his website, and I believe he was out in the UK. Yep. So from London, and you know, he kind of explained how he used JumpCloud to, you know, not even just on the MDM portion of it, but just really using JumpCloud as a whole, and how it's making his job easier to manage and really control and providing the security that he needs for Apple devices specifically. And I know that from there you have other webinars throughout what you call open office hours, or office hours, you say. And those are scheduled out through there. We'll kind of touch on that too toward the end. But I know that when I saw it, the team was great to help me get it set up. It was very clear in the dashboard to kind of get it all kind of taken care of. And we have it on a couple of devices, still playing around with it, as we have no idea what we're doing. And I say that justly because obviously, terminal commands and the same batch and PowerShell work kind of similar, but obviously there's those that are really afraid of the Apple Mac side who are very key hardcore Windows guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a great opportunity for those to really start taking that peek into that side, understanding that you can do both. And really handling a lot of the management of it. I know it took me quite some time over the last 5 years to really get into the Apple ecosystem while not betraying my Windows roots per se, which is hilarious because I actually started off on Mac way back when before I jumped to PC, and just over the last 15 years, I've just kind of lost touch on that. So that was a great piece that I kind of saw worked really, really well on having that all set up. There is some caveats you got to make sure but you're going to go through that with any MDM solution, regardless whether it's JumpCloud or some of the other popular ones that are out there as well. But kind of taking this back home, Chase, is there anything that you want to kind of shed light on with JumpCloud that I may not have mentioned, or anything that as far as in the system wise?
It's a good question. It feels like we've covered quite a bit. I think some of the other recent things that have come out that I'll kind of hit on just real quickly within systems. So we have kind of 2 other premium features that we released, and again, both of those are available for free under 10. But one is our systems insights. And so within that root agent that I was mentioning, we're also streaming back about 200 different data points on what the serial number is, what the operating system is, battery level, even goes so deep into like the number of Chrome extensions you have and what they are. And so that's really helpful for a lot of people who might not have the budget for kind of asset management or those types of things, especially within these smaller shops where you're just like, I wonder what's really going on. It gives you an extra level of kind of insight into awareness of what's happening there. And the other one that we recently released is our directory insights. And you can kind of think about that as that's just the logging of every authentication action across the system, right? And so it's a great way for a lot of the partners who are, I know we have a few that are specializing in HIPAA compliance or kind of SOC 2 Type 2 or kind of those types of organizations that will just come in and be like, all right, we're here to secure you, and here's the checklist. And we help kind of run through that and then also provide that kind of ongoing auditing and logging framework. So those were 2 other recent things that I think the team's really jazzed on, because we're able to provide so many more, not only pieces of data, right, to kind of insight observe, but in addition to everything else that we've talked about and kind of interacting with it on a couple different levels, just to make you more efficient, understanding what's going on with your client, right? So whether it's from the multi-tenant view and kind of seeing how many users, applications at a high level, and then hopping into that specific instance or other instances. But then also too, and say, I want to go deep. I want to go deep into this one Mac, right? That's still on, Snow Leopard for whatever reason, like what's going on? Those types of things that we're able to kind of now traverse across the directory, I think has been really powerful.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess, I think we hit quite a bit on the JumpCloud platform. I wanted to get very specific on this episode versus kind of what we did on the last episode there. I know that JumpCloud does have a lot of training avenues. There's a lot of great knowledge-based articles and support that is available. Support is always available to answer any questions as well. And then I know you have the office hours webinars as well. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about kind of where they can find the office hours and enroll in a session if they wanted to, and what do you kind of do? Are those topics ever changing? Are they kind of hitting on what's hot at the moment that you guys release? Kind of how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. In a couple different ways. And so one of, I guess a little sneak peek too, just because it's, happening within the next couple of days. So we'll also be announcing JumpCloud University. And so this is kind of our fully fledged, I'm trying to think of how many different courses there are, 20 plus, right? But just across the range of MFA and Radius and LDAP and kind of all those different feature sets that we talked about to get really knowledgeable around, because anytime that you're messing with someone's identity or coming in net new, there's going to be a lot of questions, right? Because it is one of those kind of core IT stack information that you're really going to be cautious about, because if all hell breaks loose, then it's at the directory level. And so one of the other pieces, right, because we're a product-led growth company, we focus so much on knowledge base articles, but now additional trainings. And then for every partner that's coming in through, we actually created a dedicated course. We call it Build Your Own Clients Directory, where it's a guided series of everything that you need to know about JumpCloud. And so within 2 hours, you can feel like a directory expert, right? And you can walk in and say, all right, I got it, right? And especially too, for some of the smaller clients, it's a free deployment as well. And so that's coming out. And then we also have our office hours, and that has been really fun to see. We actually brought on a new CMO not too long ago, and this is kind of one of those additional pieces. So every Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain, people log in, and it's basically a way to just kind of poke around the platform. And so we have our product marketing experts that walk through it, whether it's new feature announcements, other things like that. But it's also just kind of an open Q&A. And it's a chance to meet a lot of other JumpCloud admins and kind of, hey, how did you do this thing? Or kind of like, what was this command that you could run like that? And we'll demo it live. And so that's really helpful. Kind of one, people might not be as apt to generate a support ticket if they don't want to, or if that's just not the way that they want to learn. So it's a great conversational way to kind of open that up and just kind of be a part of that JumpCloud community, especially within MSP partners that are managing multiple businesses on this, where it's like, oh, how can I apply this across my fleet? Or kind of what's that next big thing that might move the needle for us? And so that's a good way to kind of have insight into our product roadmap a little bit, but then also answer current needs, right? Around kind of like, what flavors of Linux do you support? Like all those different things, like we're happy to go deep with you. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of office hours. I know that a partner of ours and the show Synchro has their office hours on Fridays as well, 9 a.m. Pacific time. And, it's similar fact. I mean, I'm a big fan of that because you can't get any more direct in connection with the community that you're trying to build. And especially with JumpCloud and kind of everything that's kind of going through. I mean, there's so much you can do in it. You just may not know how to do certain things, or by listening and just understanding somebody else's questions that you didn't even think about, help you become better at what you're doing and how you're managing the product and really working with it as well. And that's kind of how I do my deployments. I just grab the connect key, I throw it into my PSA, I run the installer for the system as I onboard a client with my RMM agent, and it just runs the PowerShell script. It'll run it through, which JumpCloud provided me very helpfully, and I was able to get that all deployed through my RMM, and we kind of just kept on rocking and rolling with some of the syncs. So, but yeah, no, again, Chase, I really appreciate you coming out today. I think it was a lot of great info. We talked a lot about kind of what JumpCloud has right now, and especially as a big update. I think it's been great to, after so long, I think it's been a year or two that you've been on, JumpCloud has been on, kind of what you guys have been up to. We're going to be reaching out to a couple other partners of ours that have been on the network before, just kind of see, hey, how's everything been? But for anyone that wants to know more about JumpCloud, or if they wanted to reach out to you directly, how would they go ahead and do that?
Yeah, a couple different ways. And so I think, we always have that free account whenever. And I think a piece of that too is every free account you create, we also have 10 days of premium chat support. And so that goes directly to our customer success engineers. So if you're in the middle of an implementation at like 2 a.m, like we're there for you. And so that's the easiest way to sign up. And then for those who are, essentially looking to extend their recurring revenue base, have another tool belt in terms of thinking about directories and kind of operating your own MSP business, just go to jumpcloud.com/partners and apply there. And you'll likely get a couple emails from me, just kind of guiding you through the process, kind of that guided series that I mentioned will get you signed up as a reseller and really kind of understand, a couple of different ways that you can make money on JumpCloud. So.
Very cool. Again, appreciate you coming out, and we will have all this information and links in the show notes. Come join us every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Watch live and hang out on the chat room over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that bell to get the notification, you should be able to download the episode on your favorite podcasting app so you don't ever miss it. I can't talk today. So you never miss an episode. Thank you for listening. We will see you next time on MSP Unplugged, which will again be July 12th, because we will be off next week. Thank you, everyone, and have a great and best of the next week. Bye-bye now.
Thank you all.